Right now, my signature program, Scribble School, is open for enrollment, but not for long. This is the robust program that will take you from knowing nothing or a little bit about hieroglyphs to reading the common text you're going to actually see in museums, online, and on trips to Egypt. And there's a very special bonus available right now for the first 25 people who sign up by Friday, May 15th. They'll get the special bonus Hieroglyph a Day planner. This planner is not available anywhere else. It's not sold separately. This is the only way to get it. So you'll want to check out all the details and grab your spot in Scribble School at scribbleschool.com. Welcome to Voices of Ancient Egypt, the podcast for people who don't just want to learn about ancient Egypt, but want to understand it on a deeper, more meaningful level. I'm Melinda Nelsonhurst, an Egyptologist with a Ph.D. in the field and years of experience teaching at the university level, working in Egypt, and training students around the world to read real ancient Egyptian texts. I've spent decades studying this civilization in a traditional academic setting so you don't have to, and so you can access knowledge that's usually locked behind academic walls. This podcast brings ancient Egyptian history, beliefs, and language to life, and shows you that learning hieroglyphs is possible, no matter your age, background, or schedule. So whether you want to read hieroglyphs in museums, on social media, or on your next trip to Egypt, you'll find the tools, stories, and encouragement to make it real right here. Let's hear the voices of the ancient world together. Hello, and welcome to the Voices of Ancient Egypt podcast. In this episode, we'll be featuring an interview with one of my students. This is part of a series I'm calling What's Working with Learning Hieroglyphs, where I interview students of mine to find out what strategies and tactics they're using to make tons of progress with hieroglyphs. These are real people with busy lives, commitments, and also a whole lot of unexpected challenges in life. And we're going to get down in the trenches with them and hear how they've been able to learn to read everything from common pharaohs' names to literature, letters, medical texts, and even the Book of the Dead. Let's jump in and hear what's really working for these real people. Thank you so much for joining me today, Marianna. I have a student of mine, Marianna, who has worked with me in both Scribble School and Master Scribes here with me today. And so let's start. Marianna, will you tell us a little bit about you, who you are and what brought you to learning hieroglyphs?
Well, I'll tell you what brought me to learning hieroglyphs is about, it has to be about 15 years now. I was at the Princeton University Museum and I went on a tour. And the student guide brought us to a sarcophagus and was reading the hieroglyphs on the side. And I said, I want to be able to do that. So, you think of that a lot. But then COVID happened and I had a lot of time on my hands. And I said, this is a perfect time to start learning hieroglyphs. And I actually enrolled in a master's program and I have an MA in Egyptology. But the focus was not on hieroglyphs. I took an introductory course, didn't learn very much. So I was trying to find a place, that it's not like you can go to your local college, and say, hey, I want to learn hieroglyphs. And that's when I came upon your course and I took a chance and it has been absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Oh, I love to hear that. Thanks so much, Marianna. Yeah, it's been amazing having you in the programs as well and seeing your progress with that. And with that, we've been working together, I guess, a little over a year now, I think, from when you started in Scribble School and then you went on to Master Scribes after that. And so I'd love to hear a bit about, the progress you've been making in how would you say, what was the picture? Let's rewind the tape here for a minute. What was the picture like before you started in my programs and what problems were you looking to sort of solve there or what goals did you have and how did that go?
I study ancient life. And I think that the only way to understand ancient cultures is through their language, when you understand a language. So I really wanted to know hieroglyphs so I could read firsthand. I think when you read a translation, it's just not the same. So as I said, in my master's program, it was called Fast Tracks Hieroglyphs. And I was studying, I am not exaggerating, 6 to 8 hours a day and just not keeping up. And I felt lost. I felt frustrated. So when I came to you, I was still a little shell shocked from that. And I was trying to do that much. But then when I got with your program that you don't need to do a million hours a day, just do a little, do it steady. And it was like slowly climbing upstairs. And it took a lot of time to shed that post-traumatic hieroglyph syndrome where I thought I had to know everything and I had to study and I had to memorize. And then I just let that go. And even I started to notice, like even just recently, like you go up a step if you do that and you go up a step and suddenly you're understanding things because I think when you're so rushed and trying to do it academically, you're really just trying for that grade. You're not trying to like really get to know what what the ancient Egyptians were saying, like what was the purpose of this text and who were the people behind it. So it would, and I see even now, I hate to say that I slowed way down, but I did. And, just spending an hour a day I've learned much quicker. I've learned much more. I understand a lot more than when I was trying to just study and study. And of course, I'm not in a program, so there's not the worry of the but I was joking to my partner the other day as I said, I think I'm ready to take that hieroglyph final that I took a year ago. I'm ready now. But even though I passed that, I did pass it. I had to pass it. I have no understanding of what I learned, like zero understanding. And I think I wrote a couple weeks ago, it used to be that I would go somewhere like the Met and I could recognize letters. And then I started to go and I could recognize words. And recently I went and I'm starting to recognize phrases. So, I joke that I'm a first grader in ancient Egypt but it's just been such a wonderful experience. And it's just, even to me, it's amazing. And I look up there and I go to people, I know what it says. I know what it says, so it's been just wonderful. Wonderful.
That's amazing, Marianna. Thank you for sharing that story. And I have to say, I even feel some familiarity with that myself. Like when I was first learning hieroglyphs, I was learning in a course in graduate school. And it was a similar experience in terms of just, it moves so fast. And, you're just really just trying to get by kind of to some extent and try to keep up. And the understanding doesn't really come with that at that point. You make it through, you're able to like take the exams and stuff like that. But then you go to a museum gallery and you're like, don't recognize anything at first, right? Yeah, it took me a lot longer after that to really get to the point where I'm actually like reading the common stuff you're going to see in places and stuff. And then much later, after starting to teach, realizing that that's really where people should start is with the things you're actually going to see in museums, right? So you can do like what you were talking about, like walking into the Met and you're actually reading like some of these common phrases and things like that on monuments. So with that in mind, I was thinking about what you were saying about going to the museum and what you can see now. I'd love to hear more about that, about how that's changed for you in terms of like, what's an example? Whether you've seen a text online or you went to a museum, like you were talking about recently, like an experience you had where you're like, just kind of had like maybe a wow moment or something that was different, from before.
Well, I talk a lot. My daughter lives in Minnesota. So the Minnesota Institute of Art has a false door. And, I've been visiting my daughter, since I've started Egyptology. So when I first went to look at the door, I could recognize maybe some of the gods. And then I would go and I'd recognize words or letters here or there. The last time I went, I didn't have my dictionary with, I couldn't read the whole door, but I could definitely tell her what was going on, what certain phrases said. And I've told you about my project. I haven't put it together yet. I bought some like butcher paper and I am making my sliding glass door into that false door. And I'm gonna, get it and I'm gonna translate the whole thing. So the next time I go, I can read the whole thing. And the truth is it wasn't that quote hard, which just me saying that shows how far I've come from, first time I saw it, I'd be like, oh, that's ISIS. That's as far as I could get. I didn't know what was going on in the scene. I couldn't even find they give you the dead person's name and I couldn't even find it. Now it was like, I was able to tell my daughter what's going on, like why this is there, who these people are, the offerings they were asking for, so it was Anubis, and so it's just amazing. And like that was amazing to me that, wow, I could actually chart my progress by that door, so it was exciting. And I can't wait to go back and say, I can read the whole thing for you.
I love that. That is a great way to do it, where you've seen that piece before and you can go back and you can read so much more now. And I know actually the piece you're talking about, because I was in Minneapolis for a conference a few years ago and saw that one there. And yeah, it's maybe not the most complex text, but it's not a super easy one either. So you should really be really proud of what you've done so far with that too. And I know you're gonna get it with that project. I love the idea of the project where you're putting together the fall store too, because I think it's such a great way to use that too. I mean, obviously going to a museum is a lot of fun and you could use your skills and stuff, but being able to create something is really cool too.
And also, having been a teacher, just being exposed to the text, even if you don't know what it is, I try to do that every day. I mean, I do my little lesson every day, but I just try to have text around, even if I don't know what the text says, because that's how you become familiar with it. And it stops being a foreign language. It starts being something that you're familiar with. And it's, when you first start, you think, oh, wow, I got this. I can, do the alphabet. And then at some point it gets really overwhelming because it's not like, they have 26 letters, or even if they had 50 letters and you just put them together in different combinations, then ta-da. It's not like that. Even working with you, the spelling of one word could be 5 different ways. So it just becoming familiar with the text has been very, very helpful, very helpful. So that'll be on my sliding glass door. So I'll look at it every day.
I love that. It's so true that it's that repeated exposure to it, whether it's doing like maybe official sort of exercises like in the curriculum and Master Scribes, or going to a museum, or seeing your project that you've put up on your sliding glass door. And it helps with, even if you're not sitting down and going, okay, I'm going to translate this, right? You are seeing those signs and you are sometimes sitting there just probably looking at it, thinking about, this part or that part and stuff. And having that recall when you see some signs and you recognize them, and having that repeated exposure really helps so much. Because like you said, you don't necessarily have to put in those tons of hours like you were doing before, but having that regular contact really, really helps a lot.
And I also noticed that, I take some online classes, and I haven't read The Shipwrecked Sailor. I should be ashamed to admit that, but I haven't. But it was on that. And so they had the hieroglyphs on one side of the screen and the translation. And I couldn't read the whole thing, but I definitely, as they were reading, could go back and forth and pick out some of the phrases. And that's kind of exciting too. It's like, I'm not totally illiterate in Middle Egyptian now. I can actually read some of it.
That's awesome. Yeah. Especially when it's amazing when you encounter it in maybe kind of an unexpected way like that too. Like you weren't going in planning to be like, I'm going to read some text today. Right. But there it was. And it's not like you'd been studying for it or anything like that. And boom, you're reading some of that text. So I imagine that must have been an amazing feeling.
Yeah. And I think everybody comes in, there are times to study, because I've had those times like, I'm not gifted in languages. And it's like, should I just give up? And this is it? Have I topped out? And then you go to something like that and you realize, I think I know a little more than I think I do, and it kind of inspires you to go on.
Absolutely. And it can really happen I find progress also is not just a smooth linear thing too, because sometimes you're working for a while and you feel like nothing's changed too much for a little bit, and then you'll make kind of a leap.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know if you found that too. And then suddenly you can understand a bunch more. I kind of liken it to exercise. Like if you're doing strength training or something, you could go weeks or even a couple months with not feeling like you're not getting any improvement in strength or something. And then all of a sudden you pick up weights one day and you're like, wait, this is easier.
Yeah, exactly. And what's nice about not being graded or having to move on to the next class is sometimes if a lesson just isn't sticking, I can step away from that one, work on something else for a little while and come back. And a lot of times when you come back, it's like something was working in your brain and you get it a little better. And then I'll be honest, I don't get everything in every lesson, but I'm taking notes and I accept that no matter what language I was learning, I mean, ancient languages are the same as modern, that I'm not going to get everything the first time, that I kind of have to keep. It's kind of like a spiral where you keep going back and then move forward and keep going back and then move forward.
Absolutely. And I think, the learning science actually bears out that that's an excellent way to do it, where you move forward and then you circle back around and go over some things again. And that helps reinforce it. And you may really surprise yourself too when you go back for it. And now it feels really different. Because like you said, your brain oftentimes is still working on it in the background, even if you don't realize it. And when you come back to things, it's like suddenly something will click. It still happens for me where I'm stuck on something for a while when I'm reading a text. And then sometimes I come back to it another day, or sometimes even just if I start talking to somebody about it, all of a sudden the thinking process is different. And an idea will come to me, or the next time I go to work on it, then it's finally like, oh yeah, of course, and I figured out that part. So it definitely sounds like you've really got a good process going there.
Yeah.
And related to that, I was wondering, sometimes I hear from people who are interested potentially in working with me in one of my programs, and they're worried about hieroglyphs being too hard, or maybe they've tried before, whether by themselves with a book, or they've taken another course and they found it really difficult and maybe gave up from that. And I thought, since you had studied before working with me also, you might be able to sort of relate to this. And I was hoping you could share with me a bit about how you overcame that challenge of going from feeling like you were really, struggling with it before to now feeling like you're making progress with hieroglyphs.
I think the difference is you understand how the language is acquired. And whereas when I was taking in academia, we're just, it's kind of like we were trying to just get bucketfuls in us. And, it wouldn't matter whether I was learning French or Middle Egyptian. If you just throw so much at me, I just feel overwhelmed because I don't know. But you put it in these small chunks that are little stairs. We're not, jumping 3 stairs at a time. And you don't as stressed. Like, you definitely give vocabulary. And I worked, I memorize and words I see over and over again. But it isn't like I have to spend an hour a day memorizing, an hour a day writing, an hour, there's nothing overwhelming. If you've got 20 minutes, you work 20 minutes. If you got an hour, you work an hour. And, sometimes on a really bad day, sometimes just reading over the lesson or I watch a video a second time is enough for it to start to stick. Your videos are very short. Whereas, my hieroglyphs lectures would sometimes be 2 hours. So I can watch a 7, 10, 15-minute video of yours over. Like, I watch it. My method is I watch it and I take notes the first time. And then usually I watch it again without taking notes. So watch it straight through. But if I don't get it, I can go watch it again and I can watch it again and I do, when you have the slides, I write those samples over and over till I understand them. Because sometimes, the first time through a video, it's not sticking. I'm not getting it. What does this mean? I'm right now doing the geminating participles. And I got to tell you, I've done that lesson over the last couple of years, probably about 10 times. This is the first time it's like, I got it. I got it. So the thing about working with you is it's your schedule. Like I said, I'm not gifted with language. And even if you were taking a class with other people where we all came at the same time, they're going to be moving ahead and you're just going to pretend you know it because you got to move ahead. Like the teacher's moving on to the next lesson. I don't have to do that. I can try it again. I can come back to it. I can, I didn't understand that video. I'm going to watch the next one. And so you break it down into such doable steps. And also, if you don't understand something, it's usually just one thing. It's not like, I don't understand 17 things, It's one thing. So you can focus on getting that. and and then it's like steps. You do it in a way that, okay, I got this. Now I'm going to go up to the next step. And I really feel like, every time I do my lessons, that it's another step. And the way you've designed the lessons is every once in a while I hit one and I'm like, I know everything because it's right there. You're like, you put one in that kind of helps build the confidence to move on. And I like that we work together, kind of. We have the boards, but we're definitely not on the same lesson at the same time. And it's just, you are the first person I've met who understands how a difficult language is acquired. It's just amazing. And like, I do a lesson a day, but that doesn't mean that I finish a lesson a day. You can do it at your own speed, but somebody who gets it can move as fast as they want. And somebody who's slow like me can do them over and over and over until you get it. I shouldn't admit this to you, but what I do is I take the answer key and I write out all the lessons and then I put that away. So I have done it. And then I do it without the answer key because I've had, I don't have to do that as much as I used to in the beginning, but I have the confidence that I did translate this. Okay, so let's see if I can get it now. And if I can, then I'll refer to the answer key. But I do that until I can take the blank and translate it without any problem.
I love that. So you're like basically reverse engineering it by looking at the answer key, right? And figuring out like how it all fits together and stuff. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I provide the answer keys. Like I do generally advise people to like do what they can first before looking at it. But I mean, everybody has their own process, of course, and everybody can do it their own way. And it sounds like you've made tremendous progress by doing that. Because like you said, you don't even need to look at it so much anymore, right? Compared to before.
Right.
And so, so obviously that's working for you. And I love how you come back to it then and do it again, like without the answer key and stuff. It's such a wonderful tactic. And I think it's something I often encourage in the group. But I know like human nature, of course, that a lot of times we don't want to do that. We're like, we don't want to do the same thing over again, right? We want to move on to the next thing. And that's good too, to move on to the next thing. But it's great to like circle back like we were talking about earlier and go over things again too. You don't necessarily, sometimes they can kind of go the opposite way where people get stuck on one lesson and they're doing it over and over and over before they'll move on. But I think it's like a mix between the two kind of that really can work. And it sounds like you found that balance for you.
I'm also a glutton for punishment because I'm also learning how to write them. So I take the lesson and I write it. I write the whole thing out and I block out the words. So I do each one of the words and I write, this is a verb, this is a noun, this is a participle. I actually, because I'm an English teacher, I don't know if you remember the old-fashioned diagramming.
Right.
But so I'm not just translating. I want to understand what part of speech, what is it working with? And so it does take me a long time to get a lesson done. But I feel when I'm done, I really understand it.
Yeah, that makes sense that like you said, you're kind of reverse engineering it there and you're diagramming and you're figuring out the parts to help it, make sense to you.
And sometimes it's like, oh, that's a participle. No wonder.
Yeah.
No,
and I mean, that still happens to me. Even if you've been doing this for years, a lot of times when you're first reading something, you're like, wait, what? What's going on here? And it takes a while to kind of work through it if it's not something that's really similar to things you've read before. And there's a lot of variety since it's a language. So you can definitely run into things where, it takes a while to tease it out. So related to some of the things you were saying about the speed, you were talking about how, you're able to go at your own pace and everybody's working together, but not necessarily on the same lessons, right? Like some people might be working on curriculum in Scribal School, like in the first few modules. Some people might be working in sort of the next level after that, like at the beginning of Master Scribes curriculum, or some are like eating up every bit of curriculum as I put it out, because I'm always adding to the program and ending it like that. So I was thinking about what you said with the timing, and sometimes I hear from people considering joining Master Scribes, and they're not sure that it's a good time because they feel like they don't have a lot of time on their hands, and or maybe they have some big things in life coming up that they feel like are going to be disruptive with that. And I think to some extent we can all, of course, relate to life doesn't go according to plan oftentimes, right? Whether this be in smaller ways or bigger ways, a lot of things can happen. And I wanted to hear from you your thoughts on, how have you been able to continue making progress in Master Scribes and use Master Scribes to your advantage to help you sort of keep on track with making progress, even when, life maybe doesn't go according to plan or throws you a monkey wrench, things like that.
Well, the semester I was writing my thesis, I was diagnosed with some rather strange problems, one being a rare endocrine cancer. And not only was I sick and receiving treatment, I was taking medication that made it difficult to remember.
Mm-hmm.
So I joined you still on a lot of that medication, but I don't know whether you want to say giving yourself grace, but if you think about it, if you were going to a regular school, you wouldn't go to college classes every day. You'd go like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, and Thursday. So if you give yourself grace and say, I may not be able to do these lessons every day, but I have more time on Mondays and Thursdays. So I am going to promise to do it on Mondays and Thursdays. I mean, it's a slower progress, but I would put information on 3x5 cards, either vocabulary or just a little rule. And so on the days that I really couldn't do a lesson, I just flipped through the cards,
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody's got a very busy schedule, things just happen. To any, you can work it. There was a time when I didn't have a lot of time that I would do the video on one day, the lesson the next day, and then I would you say in Scribal School 20 minutes a day. And of course, as we get on, we want to work more. But the truth is, if you can give it an honest 20 minutes, not like scrolling through your Facebook, but an honest 20 minutes, I'm going to sit there and do focus work for 20 minutes. I think people would be surprised how much they learn. And actually, I think we all have, I call it a fill level that, there's a level that once you study past, nothing's going in, nothing's sticking. But 20 minutes, almost everything is going to stick, So, and just, I have this habit of thinking about the lesson maybe while I'm doing something else that day. So it sticks. So then the next day you do an honest 20 minutes and the way you have it progressing is that you're, like I said, you're not going to learn to be an expert in 1 year, but you'll learn enough and start noticing that those little 20 minutes just add up. They just do. And so if I'm having a really busy week, I might say, I try to do it 5 days a week. 3 days a week, that's great. I did it 3 days a week. It's what it is. If unfortunately have to be away for a while, what I'll do is maybe do a day or two of review and then jump back. But I also think if you have purpose, like why do I want to learn hieroglyphs, and keep that in your mind, then you know what you're working for. I mean, if you're going to go to Egypt and read temple walls, say, I want to be able to read those temple walls, or, I want to translate. So I'm in for the very long haul, but not everybody wants to translate. So keep that goal in mind and say, if you'd gone too many days, you're like, I'm not working on my goal. I got to go work on my goal. And I even found some websites that, they show you the sign and you have to put in the sound it makes or match it up. You can do that like on a coffee break, like, okay, quick, go through a couple of signs. So I understand being busy, but, isn't the saying, if you want something done, ask a busy person to do it? I also think it's helpful that I schedule it. This is when I used to schedule it. I'm an online professor. I used to schedule it after my classes, but I found that my mind was already too full. So I moved that to right after dinner. So right after dinner, I'm in the relaxed mode. I'm in the receptive mode, and I do my lessons then. And so it works for me.
Yeah, that's great. I love how you've, tried different things and massaged it and figured out what works for you and what makes progress. And like you said, I love that if you dedicate the 20 minutes, and it's a real 20 minutes, like you said, not scrolling social or something like that, that really does add up and make progress. And then before you know it, you're walking in and reading the full story, right?
Yeah.
And
I also think if you give it the 20 minutes, then you're going to want to study more. Was like, sometimes I'm like, oh, I only got a half hour tonight. And I find myself like suddenly an hour and a half later, it's like because I got interested in the text.
Right. Yeah. I think that that's a really important point you bring up, because also if you have if you're going to do 20 minutes and it turns out that you could do more, by the time
Yeah.
you've done your 20 minutes, you might just decide to continue. You don't have to. If you only have 20 minutes, of course, you can leave off there. But a lot of times, starting with a small chunk of time makes it easier to start.
Yeah.
Because you realize, well, I'm just going to do 20 minutes and it doesn't sound like a big deal. Right.
Yeah.
And then once you get going, though, then you're like, oh, I want to do some more,
Yeah.
know, and stuff. I don't know, like maybe you've run across before. Sometimes people say that about, other things that people might have a hard time starting with, like decluttering or cleaning or whatever. They say, like, just set a 5-minute timer, right? Because it takes
Yes.
the pressure off. If you're just going to do 5 minutes, anybody can do 5 minutes, right? But a lot of times you'll just find yourself going like, oh, I'm going to do some more, and you end up doing, because it's starting can be the hardest part. So it's a great way also just to take away that resistance that we can run into sometimes, even with things we really want to do, like learn hieroglyphs,
Yeah, I know I really want to do this. And there are some days like, and then you're like, nope, sit down and do it. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So as we wind down, I was thinking about some of the people who might be thinking about joining us in Master Scribes, and they're not sure if they should really take the leap. Maybe they feel like, I'm not sure if it's a good fit, or maybe it's not a good time, or whatever it might be. They're sort of on the fence about making that decision, and they're not sure about it. And I was wondering, what would you say to somebody who's thinking about joining?
Because I say this a lot to people. If you don't join in the 3 months, you're not going to know any hieroglyphs. If you do join, your chances are better that you're actually going to know something at the end of the course, even if you didn't do every lesson. If you don't sign up, like people always ask me, should I do this? And it's like, if you don't, you want to do it. So what could be the worst thing that happens? The worst thing that happens is you don't finish the course, but it's not like you're going to lose your job or something if you don't finish the course. I just think time is going to pass anyway. Is time going to pass and you be in the same space you are? Or is time going to pass and you took this chance? And who knows? Like, for me, it was just looking at a guide showing me hieroglyphs. And the next thing you know, I'm in this totally different place. You have no idea. Like I said, the worst happens. You take 6 months, you decide it wasn't for me, but you know more than when you started, and nobody comes to hieroglyphs. It's not like they come because they want to learn hieroglyphs. It's not like a simple little course like, oh yeah, I want to, I don't know, learn how to bake a cake. That's not going to be that's not really life-changing, but hieroglyphs could be. Because you just don't teach a language. I have to tell you, I learned more about Egypt, Egyptian, and gods from you than I did in some master level courses. So even if you don't language, you're going to have a better understanding of ancient Egyptian culture, gods, just the way they thought than you did before. So, if somebody's on the fence, jump in. I mean, just jump in. You're going to learn things, even if they only had time to watch the videos, which would be crazy if you didn't do the lessons. You're still going to learn so much. I can't even tell you the things I learned from you that had nothing to do with the language itself. Yeah, do it.
I love it, Marianna. Thank you so much. And
well, thank you.
Thank you for spending this time with me today. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to continuing to support you. And
thank you. Thank you for everything. It's been amazing.